Be back with you again. Advocacy requires flexibility, so I'm being very flexible. I'm going to be modifying my remarks a little bit in the interest of time. So you heard some of my remarks about opioids and fentanyl. What's important to know is that more New Yorkers now die from drug overdose than car crashes, and overdose is the leading cause of death in the city's homeless shelter system. Last year, we lost over 900 people to overdose. 80% of those deaths involved at least one opioid, 59% involved heroin. We've also seen a significant spike in the presence of fentanyl. It's a potent synthetic opioid that is 100 times more potent than morphine. While in previous years, fentanyl was only present in about 3% of overdose deaths, in 2016, that proportion has spiked to 50%, almost 50%. These statistics are staggering, but we know that they are not unique or endemic to New York City. Opioid misuse impacts thousands of lives across America, in urban areas and in rural areas, conservative and liberal, across gender, age, and ethnicity. So I can only begin to tell you how proud I am of this administration's efforts in combating this disease. Building on the important foundation of substance use interventions through state-directed contracts, Mayor de Blasio has added significant new funding for treatment programs and prevention efforts. This has more than doubled our substance use programming to nearly $30 million annually so that we can take a more comprehensive approach. From a policy perspective, New York's public health approach to this problem is on the leading edge. We are the largest U.S. network for syringe exchange. We've pioneered naloxone distribution to state-registered opioid overdose prevention programs, and our opioid prescription guidelines were the basis for CDC's guidelines. But even with all of this, we know it's not enough. That's why this administration has convened a multi-agency coordinated response across public health and public safety interventions so that we can continue to align our efforts. We know what's happening across the city. We need to better raise public awareness while reducing stigma, and we need to bend the curve to reduce opioid deaths. We've established a standing order to make naloxone available in pharmacies without prescription. We're testing decedents for the presence of fentanyl through our Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. And we've launched a response system to connect individuals who've experienced non-fatal overdose with the right care and support. As Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, I really have a unique vantage point. It's my job to think strategically about how we can better care for populations in our city by integrating the services across public health, healthcare, social services, to begin improving their health and their well-being. So as I said, I'm proud of the many city initiatives that are the building blocks of this coordinated response. Current and ongoing investments in behavioral health through Thrive NYC have set the stage for raising public awareness and destigmatizing drug misuse. Our Weekend of Faith engaged trusted faith leaders and their congregations in opening an important dialogue about mental health. NYC Well provides access to free, confidential mental health support and substance use services with just a phone call or a text message. Mental Health First Aid, which you'll hear about more later this morning, teaches the skills to respond to signs of mental illness and substance abuse. And in April, the mayor also announced a comprehensive plan to fundamentally transform New York City's public health system into a leading healthcare entity for the 21st century. New York City Health and Hospitals is the city's largest single provider of behavioral health services, responsible for more than a third of the psychiatric and substance abuse-related hospital stays in 2014 in New York City. Despite this incredible care that Health and Hospitals already provides, we still need to dramatically expand its reach in order to engage all those who struggle with substance use disorders. This means treating more patients more comprehensively, becoming a model for delivering treatments, expanding the availability of buprenorphine in primary care settings, promoting judicious prescription of opioids, and expanding medically assisted treatment via the Health and Hospitals methadone clinics. I'll be speaking actually just later today when I leave this meeting to health and hospital staff who are convened on this very topic, transforming substance use care at New York City Health and Hospitals. The health agencies in my portfolio are also working in partnership with their city colleagues in social services, criminal justice, and enforcement. We're distributing naloxone at our city's shelters. We're training and deploying thousands of patrolling officers with naloxone kits. We're providing medically assisted therapy and substance misuse programming within the correction system. So these are just some of our investments. And with a growing awareness and commitment to come together across sectors, both within New York City and across the incredible network of communities and regions, many represented here in this room, I believe that together, we can turn the tide on the opioids epidemic. Coming out of this conference, I call on all of you to keep exchanging your best practices, your ideas, and your challenges so that we can learn from and assist one another to combat what is a complex but critically important component for the health of our individuals, our families, and our communities. All of us have a stake in the success of our mental health system. All of us have a stake in this success for everyone. When our neighbors are healthy, our neighborhoods are healthy. And when our neighborhoods are healthy, our cities thrive. So I want to thank you for the incredible work that you do to improve the lives of your cities, your counties, your communities each and every day. And as I close, oh, thank you. As I close, it's my great honor to introduce Father Joseph McShane, president of Fordham University. Through his generosity and hospitality, we've been able to use this donated space to host this most important conference. It's partnerships like these that allow us to come together and address issues that impact all New Yorkers. A native of New York, Father McShane entered the Society of Jesus in 1967 and was ordained a priest in 1977. He received both a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Boston College and a master's degree in theology from the Jesuit School of Theology at Berkeley in 1977. He completed his doctorate in the history of Christianity at the University of Chicago in 1981. So it seems like he spends a lot of time in places that promote revolution for social justice. He served as a member of the Department of Religious Studies at Lemoyne College in Syracuse, New York, from 1981 to 1992. He served as the dean of Fordham College at Rose Hill from 1992 to 1998, and in 1998, he became the president of the University of Scranton, a post he held until he returned to his native New York in 2003 to assume Fordham's presidency. So thank you, and please join me in welcoming Father McShane.
Are you native New Yorker?
I am.
What
From
borough?
the Bronx,
We're in the Bronx.
170th Street and Clay Avenue.
My mother was 163rd and
Bronx.
Melrose. So there you go, 163rd and Melrose. Very good. Thank you very much. I wish we had better weather for you. I apologize. I spoke to the Lord this morning, and he said, the reservoirs are down. You got to take what I can send, and it has to come today. So I apologize on that. And if we at Fordham seem a little giddy this week, it's because on Saturday, we returned to Yankee Stadium for a football game for the first time in 70 years. And we played the College of the Holy Cross from Worcester. And we were victorious, and it was our first football win in Yankee Stadium since 1941, our centennial year. So we're celebrating our 175th with a win. But anyhow. Now, I want to thank all of you for coming to Fordham. And I say to all who work in the mayor's office here in New York, we want you to consider us your second home when you want to have conferences. We'd be delighted and honored if you would come and be with us here and also on the Rose Hill campus in the Bronx. Our city is very dear to us, and we want to do everything that we possibly can to help the city and through New York City, all cities in the country. I also want to thank those of you who are not from New York, we pray for you, for taking time out of your busy schedules for this conference. You represent with us today many regions of the country and cities of every size imaginable. And also joining us today is Congresswoman Grace Napolitano, who represents California's 32nd District, which includes large parts of Los Angeles County and therefore I think the city of Los Angeles as well. I'm very glad to have a chance to speak with you very briefly, which is very unusual for a Jesuit to say anything briefly. Very glad to have a chance to speak to you today. I believe, because I'm a native New Yorker and because I have collected cities, as you heard, over the course of my lifetime, I believe that mayors are the unsung heroes of American civic life, and I mean that. Mayors have all the responsibilities of the executive branch, but must often rely on the cooperation of governors and state and federal legislators to get anything done. Mayors face the gritty, intractable problems of cities at the street level, where grand theories of urban planning and legislative agendas often go to die. Mayors are the ones citizens turn to for their most basic needs. Water, of course, power, paved streets, policing, firefighting, sanitation, and a host of other essential services. Sadly, your budgets are always too small, and the demands placed on your municipalities and on you are far too great. Yet you soldier on, solving problems, helping citizens, and nurturing local businesses. It's retail politics in the best sense of that phrase, and you're doing work that matters deeply to your constituents and for your constituents every day, whether they recognize that every day or not. You really are the unsung heroes. And I'm not just talking about the mayors, although I have more respect and more admiration and more affection for mayors than I could ever say. But through you, through the mayors, to all the members of the staffs of the cities, you are extraordinarily important. From the way I'm dressed, you will not be offended or surprised if I say that you do God's work every day. And sometimes the work that God doesn't seem to be down on the ground with all the time. So you do God's work, and he relies on you for that. Now, one of the most important issues that you face, and perhaps the most least talked about outside of policy circles or conferences like this, is mental health and mental health services. Such services are often seen as an add-on, something to be considered when your constituents' most basic needs are met, or when their more showy needs are met. But there's nothing more central to a person's sense of well-being than mental health. Sadly, by the time that the most vulnerable citizens in your cities seek help, they are already, let us be honest, in crisis. Therefore, I'm gratified to see all of you here at Cities Thrive today. I believe that the issues discussed here are among the most important and the most difficult to address. I applaud your vision and your willingness to do so. And I must say, as a Jesuit, I would be willing to bet that this is a conference that Pope Francis would love to be at, because this is where the heart of the human family is really being plumbed, and where the work of mercy is being planned and done every day. Now it is my proud duty to introduce to you Tom Cochran, the CEO and Executive Director of the United States Conference of Mayors, a post that he has held for almost 3 decades. Now there's a saint. He had been the conference's Deputy Executive Director for 17 years prior to his current appointment. And previously, he served in government in the Office of Economic Opportunity and in the Office of the President. Mr. Cochran is a double bulldog. That is to say, he is twice over a University of Georgia graduate. He holds both his undergraduate and law degrees from the University of Georgia. And admit it, you all knew that they were bulldogs. How else could he spend so many years in public service and not be dismayed and not be put off by all that he has to do every day? You have to have the heart of God and the tenacity of a bulldog to pull that off. He has spent most of his adult life thinking about and supporting urban and suburban policy. In his role as the director of the conference, he has been your advocate, day in and day out, for good policy on the federal, state, and local levels. It is another heroic role, and largely, sadly, an anonymous one. Therefore, I hope that here, in the friendly confines, not of Wrigley, but the friendly confines of Fordham at Lincoln Center, that you join me in giving him the recognition today that he so richly deserves. Mr. Cochran.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Thank you very much. I bleed red and black, and the way the season is going, we are bleeding. Seriously, I've been working with mayors of the United States since 1969, and I think we've gone through 12 presidents. And the issue that we are talking about today is a big part of the cities of America. We want to commend the First Lady McCray for holding this meeting and appreciate the fact that it will continue in our national meetings, U.S. Conference of Mayors, our winter meeting in January, and our summer meeting in June. The role of the mayor is to be tough, have safe streets, but also, as Mayor Dick Lee of New Haven, Connecticut once said, it's the role of the mayor to wipe away the tears. And so we see in so many ways what mayors have to do. My president, his name is Mick Cornett, and he is mayor of Oklahoma City. He was a newscaster in 1995. He witnessed the Murray bombing and was part of bringing the mental health of that city back to the thriving city of Oklahoma City that we have today. He brought thunder, he brought happiness, and he knew how to do that. Plus, he put the whole city on a diet, and he's recognized for the programs he has instituted in Oklahoma City for not just mental health, but physical health. He is the president of the United States Conference of Mayors. He is a Republican. He and I were in Cleveland. He addressed the convention, and we are, of course, seeking a meeting with the president-elect. But today, we're here, and I'm so proud to introduce to all of you the President of the United States Conference of Mayors, Mick Cornett of Oklahoma City.
Thank you. It is good to be back in New York City, and I was glad to hear your president discuss the friendly confines of Fordham. As an NYU graduate, I'm always glad to hear I'm not going to have things thrown at me when I arrive on campus. But what a wonderful city! And you know, when you're a mayor and you're in New York City, I think you're just constantly amazed at the way this city works and the men and women who run the police department and the sanitation department. And I suppose it's true that mayors look at a city differently, but the way this city works and operates every single day, 24/7, is an amazing mixture of really, really good people that I think in some way explains the spirit of the whole community. I'm pleased to be here to discuss this conversation today, and I know many of you are advocates and probably thinking to yourself, look, I live and breathe this stuff. What am I going to learn from a mayor? And that would certainly be understandable. My backgrounds are in a lot of different things, but not mental health. I see it from different perspectives. But all of us, if we've not been touched inside our personal families, have had close friends or family members who have been involved. And I wanted to discuss up front a friend of mine whose name is Mark Costello. Now, I still remember the first time I met Mark Costello. It was at a Republican watch party in 2014. And when he walked in the room, he wasn't by himself. He walked in with his wife and several members of his family. His kids were there, and that was a little unusual. You know, watch parties are typically for, adult couples, but, not too many kids show up. I can imagine if I asked my 3 grown boys to come to a watch party, I'm sure they would suddenly have something better to do. But yet, here was a family walking into the watch party. And as I met Mark for the first time, I was very aware of the story because it had been very public. Mark Costello had been a self-made man. He and his wife had started a business. It had grown rapidly through the years. They had many, many employees. At some point, attributed and accomplished a significant amount of wealth. And in his 50s, Mark Costello decided to move into an area of public service. And everyone knew he had political ambitions at this point, and he decided to run for state labor commissioner. Now, that's a big job. I mean, running statewide for your first elective office is no easy chore. But Mark put the same work habits that he'd had as a business leader into a politician, and he won easily in November of that previous year. And so Mark Costello comes to the office and drew praise immediately from what would be considered both sides of the aisle and both sides of the issues that he worked on. He and his wife and his kids made an adorable Christmas card, I'm sure. Each child seemingly more beautiful than the last. They're immaculately dressed. They're overly polite. And you just sense that this was a family that had attempted and tried to do everything right. They were Catholic. They had 5 children. They were living in some level of affluence in the suburban sections of Oklahoma City. So I knew him a little bit, but looked forward to continued public life and getting to know him better. Yet we were a little surprised in April of 2015 when Mark showed up at the state capitol for Mental Health Day. Now, about every state has a mental health day. Most of them are in April, some of them aren't. But it's when legislators are asked to fund mental health to the level that the advocates feel like it deserves. And usually it's state representatives, some state senators, a few people that work in the industry show up, and they try to draw media attention, try to draw attention to it. Yet Mark Costello was there as the labor commissioner, and Mark spoke like the other officials did, and it was not totally out of character for Mark to show up at an event like that, but still it seemed a little bit puzzling. It wasn't necessarily his complete line of work. But what Mark and Kathy Costello were not disclosing and had not discussed publicly was the family secret that their oldest son had developed schizophrenia. Started showing signs of it when he was a late teenager, and now it was 8 years later, and he had become estranged from the family. They obviously had the means to try and deal with it and try to get their son Christian some help, and so they were using the best mental health doctors that they could find, trying to get him the medicines that would help ease the pressures that he was facing, and were dealing with it the best they could. But Christian's behavior became more erratic, crossed into some level of danger, and at some point it was important for him to be removed from the family and try and continue on until they had a better idea. Well, in August of 2015, Christian called his dad and said he wanted to get together and talk. And Mark was grateful, but also somewhat suspicious because Christian's behavior had become so erratic. He didn't want him to come over to the house, so they decided to meet at a neighborhood restaurant, not too far from where they lived. And at the restaurant, an argument ensued. Christian pulled out a knife and started coming after his dad. Bystanders, started trying to grab them, trying to get between them, but the fight ensued off into the parking lot, where Christian continued to stab his father until he could no longer stand up and fell to the ground, as the passerbys now were able to succumb Christian and hold him until the police arrived. Kathy Costello was summoned from the house. She arrived just in time to be holding her husband as he died in the parking lot at the restaurant. And so, as you can imagine, in Oklahoma, this was a wake-up call in the area of mental health. This was an opportunity not only to say what a tragedy it was, but to also point out that this is a stigma that doesn't need to be kept behind closed doors. It needs to be brought out in the open. You're never going to really resolve an issue if you're not talking about it. And this was an opportunity for Oklahoma to start talking about it. Now, what has ensued is steps in the right direction. I know the mental health issue is much larger than the criminal justice system, but generally when mayors get involved, it is through that criminal justice aspect, which is a small piece of the entire system, but nonetheless, it is the one that we potentially have the most control over. And so we looked at our local mental health situation, and we could see that the city was doing this, and the sheriff was doing this, and the local court system was doing this, and we were all operating in silos, and we knew it was an inefficient system. We knew it wasn't exactly a very humane situation. So we engaged with a New York consulting group called VERA. Are people familiar with VERA? Raise your hand if you, okay. See, in Oklahoma, nobody knows who VERA is, but I suspected in this room in New York, people might have heard of this organization. But they have come in and started to look at the way that we deal with our jail population. And they have forced us to discover, upon their review, what we kind of, I guess, in the back of our minds suspected but didn't want to admit, and that is that there was almost, in every sense, the person that was located inside our county jail, the one common denominator was that they were poor. And of course, no elected official can justify a jail population that is overwhelmingly poor. How do you support that sort of reasoning? And so we are in the process, with their help, of redesigning our entire criminal justice system. And of course, there is a mental health aspect to that. We expect to go to the voters and ask them to fund some sort of solution once we get this sorted out and have designed the type of criminal justice system we want. But we suspect it will have a capital component with a new facility, but it'll also have operational components, so we can start to address the population with the mental health needs that are necessary. And so we're putting people in jail that we actually think should be in jail. And I will close with what happened just last Tuesday in Oklahoma. We had a state question that directly dealt with this issue on a statewide basis. State question 780 was designed to reduce the prison population and to also try and get more people to seek treatment as opposed to being locked up for drug offenses or alcohol offenses or petty crimes that seemingly perhaps could be avoided if there wasn't some sort of an addiction issue attached to it. 780 passed. There was an accompanying measure, State Question 781, and 781 directs that the savings that can be captured from putting fewer people in prison will automatically go to support the programs to help support these people. And so, as you can tell in Oklahoma, we're dealing with it from a lot of different angles. And we're hoping that Mark Costello's death does not go in vain. And I will close this part of it with remarks that Mark Costello gave on Mental Health Day in April of 2015. He says, "We must be understanding and understand that society cannot ignore this problem. And if it does so at its peril." In closing out, the comments here, mayors are having a reckoning with the mental health issue. I don't think you're going to find a mayor in the country now that will not only acknowledge it, but explain what they are trying to do to address it. And so, if you are coming to this conference from around the area or around the country, feel good that your mayor is a willing listener in this area and is probably looking for a way to be involved and to be helped. It's not necessarily an easy issue for them to be involved with. Typically, funding comes from federal and state levels and typically not city levels, but they are anxious and willing to get involved and to help you in any way you can, and sometimes it's just to raise awareness on the problem, and mayors can be effective in that. Well, we are all here today at the invitation of Chirlane McCray, and of course, my connection to her is with her husband, Mayor Bill de Blasio. Mayor de Blasio and I have been working together for the last 2 years on different issues. He and I were in Washington, D.C., lobbying Congress on the transportation bill in the summer of 2015. One of my senators was a critical member of the United States Senate on the transportation bill, and so you can imagine when Mayor de Blasio and I walk in, it's an eye-opening experience, not only because he's so tall and I'm not, but because, you know, here's a Republican and a Democrat who have come into Congress and they agree on something. And that is a rare component some days in Washington. He and I have also worked on mental health. We created an op-ed piece that ran in several publications, including here in New York. And I think it's a good example of how, you know, mayor's work is rarely partisan. You know, the work that we do is about providing services and trying to create a better quality of life in our cities. And so we look for opportunities to work across the aisle. And so it is with that my pleasure to introduce my friend and your mayor, Mayor Bill de Blasio. Bill? Thanks, man.
Well, good morning, everybody. I have to tell you, I'm so appreciative to everyone who's here as part of this conference that's dealing with an issue that affects literally all elements of life in our cities. I want to first thank you for your commitment and for your involvement. I have to thank my friend Mick because I was listening, Mick, as you talked about your perspective and some of the things that led you to be a leader on mental health issues. I want to say a couple of things about why that's so important. First, yes, Mick's right. When he and I walked into Senator Inhofe's office, I think we were the ultimate odd couple. I think we presented something they hadn't quite seen before. But what Mick and I understood very early on is that we shared a real perspective on the way that we could help the people of our cities and the way working together would strengthen all of us. And it was very organic, and I have to say, if you get to know Mick, he is just a wonderful human being and someone who makes it easy for people of all different backgrounds, all different views to work together. And that's a blessing. For the people of Oklahoma City, that's a blessing. But it's a blessing for all of us because now he's president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And Mick, I think I can say this in a perfectly nonpartisan, objective fashion. You have entered into that leadership position at a particularly powerful moment in history. And your voice is going to be amplified for that reason, and more necessary than ever. So I want everyone to know that this nation's cities look to the president of the Conference of Mayors as our voice, and as someone who can really register in Washington what cities need across the board, every region, every party affiliation, big, small. There's one guy who gets to be our voice. And I want to say on behalf of mayors all over the country, we could not be luckier than to have Mick as the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors at this moment. Let's thank him for all he does. And I'm going to talk about, obviously, the subject matter at hand, but I'll intersperse it with the moment in history because it's on everyone's mind. I think we have to make sense of it together. I do think it's important to remember that there is power and there is hope in bipartisanship. We're about to go into uncharted territory. There's a lot we're going to have to work out. But one thing we know is that bipartisanship is one of the answers. When we can reach it, it has a special power. And that's obviously because the country has become polarized in many ways. It puts a special opportunity and a special obligation on all of us to seek those chances to work together, and also to dispel the stereotypes that pervade our public life. We're going to talk about the stigma of mental health as one of those great challenges to overcome, and one of the underlying things we're discussing in everything in this conference. But there's a stigma about partisanship too. And any time that we can overcome it, it has a powerful meaning. Let me give you the example of what Mick just talked about in the referendum in Oklahoma. You know, people have assumptions across states and regions, but God bless the people of Oklahoma. They took an important stand on behalf of addressing the issue of incarceration and the issue of mental health. And Mick in Oklahoma City has been a leader on mental health. This is something that we have to foster everywhere in the country. We have to show that this is a national movement to change the way we do things, and that when we show, in fact, how universal it is, it gains power. When it takes on that meaningful and real aura of bipartisanship, the movement gains power. And we have a chance to do that here. Now, it's also a point in time where we have to recognize we're all leaders in different ways. And we got a lot of people out there, doesn't matter who they voted for, a lot of people confused about what this next period in our history is going to mean. Well, one thing we leaders have to do is to be the voices of clarity. And we have to model good behavior. We have to show people a positive way forward. I think this conference, which was planned well before we knew what the results of the presidential election would be, but this conference is a very good example in and of itself of people rolling up their sleeves, trying to deal with an essential issue, people from all different backgrounds in common cause. And we have to remember that this is a time where that's going to matter. Those examples, that leadership by example, is going to give people hope. Another thing leaders do is give people hope. I had the pleasure of visiting Oklahoma City a few weeks back for a conference of mayors meeting. One thing that Mick has done is given people hope that that city is continuing to grow and strengthen. We all have to do that in the work, but also in how we comport ourselves out in the larger community. This administration has seen our efforts around mental health as absolutely essential. You're going to hear from the author of so much of this work in a moment, who I'm entirely objective about, despite the fact that I'm married to her. But I want you to know, with Chirlane's leadership, this has become an administration-wide priority. Because we took stock of the fact that mental health reaches into every issue, veritably speaking. It reaches into so much of what we deal with, and it's actually at the root of so many of the challenges. So it's a situation in our administration where people feel this, and they feel a team-wide commitment to addressing it. And I just want to thank the members of our team who are here. Deputy Mayor Herminia Palacio, Deputy Mayor Richard Bury, our Health Commissioner, Dr. Mary Bassett, our extraordinary Veterans Services Commissioner, former Brigadier General Lori Sutton, our Social Services Commissioner Steve Banks, Chirlane's Chief of Staff Roxanne John, and Carla Matero, who with her team put on this event and does so many wonderful gatherings for our city. Dr. Gary Belkin, who's a leader in mental health efforts at our health department, and Andy Zuniga, our Director for Federal Affairs. I want to thank all of them for their strong commitment to addressing mental health and for their commitment to making this conference something that would have big ramifications all over the country for spreading ideas that we share with each other and helping us all to move forward. I want to thank my fellow mayors, in addition to Mick, Mayor Denise Simmons of my hometown of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Mayor Laurel Prussing of Urbana, Illinois, and Mayor Javier Gonzalez of Santa Fe. And of course, from the Conference of Mayors, our Executive Director, Tom Cochran, thank you so much. And our host, Father McCray of Fordham University for allowing us to be in this wonderful space. Look, the cities of this country are going to provide a leadership at this moment. I can tell you that right now. We don't know where the national picture will lead us. We do know that in any time of change or tumult, that cities take on a special meaning. And that's more true, I would argue, today than ever before in history. We are more and more the centers of our nation, more and more people moving into cities, more and more we're the economic hubs. And our leadership combined creates a reality. You've seen it on a whole host of issues all over the country. There's been a really extraordinary national dialogue on trying to make sure that people had decent wages and benefits. That started in a number of cities and spread all over the country, and also resulted in referenda being passed in red states and blue states. There's been an amazing effort by cities all over the country to share ideas and to help each other get better. And this is deepening. And when it happens in enough places, it becomes the reality. And I think this is something that's so important to understand. I've talked to people a lot lately about the fact in a federal government system, our government was built to recognize and respect states and localities. Which means when the local level is moving in unison and creating a new reality, that becomes the pervasive understanding of things for millions and millions of people. That becomes their reality, and then, in many ways, Washington has to follow. Doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't always happen easily, but there are so many examples of things changing at the city level well before they were adapted as national policy. And we have to understand at this moment in history that gives us a special obligation to get it right, to show that things can keep moving forward. Now, on mental health, we have an ability to achieve several things at once, in my view. Yeah, there's the extraordinarily important practical work of figuring out how we can reach our people better. And I'm so thankful to Chirlane for constantly reminding us in our administration that these initiatives are only as good as they are accessible to the people. They're not supposed to be on paper. They're supposed to live and breathe in every single neighborhood and in our schools and everywhere our public is. We have a chance to show people a model that works. And we also have a chance to address the stigma. And it is sometimes daunting when you think about stigma, when you think about something that's been off limits, misunderstood, stereotyped. When you think about all we want to do is serve people, but we got to get over this mountain that stands in our way first. I remind people that that change also comes from the grassroots. Changing the assumptions, changing the mindset starts at the grassroots. And it has happened over and over and over again. You will hear at this moment, and I'm blending our subject matter with the moment in history a bit, but you will hear people who are very discouraged, and I don't blame anyone who may feel that way, but I ask people to remember their history. Was it easy for those who started the civil rights movement to change the understanding of this country, to change the culture, to change our history? Was that easy? Did it happen in one jump? No. It took years and decades. But we do know assuredly it started at the grassroots. It started at a lot of lunch counters and a lot of churches. Was it easy to win the battles for working people? Think about 100 years ago. There weren't a lot of working people who were represented by a labor union, and that grew from the grassroots and changed our assumptions about what were safe working conditions, what was fair pay, what was a fair work week. All of those things happened from the grassroots and changed the culture and changed what was possible. Surely, if those things could happen, we can change the culture around mental health as well. But it'll have to come from us and all the people we reach. Chirlane and her team did one thing that struck me so powerfully. They made the very powerful decision that if we're going to change culture, if we're going to change mindset, let's go to some of the folks who are most trusted, our faith leaders. And I'd love to tell this story. I don't know if it's in your remarks. I will. I just have to say it. They started out with the notion that, maybe a few dozen houses of worship would participate. If they did one weekend, they asked everyone from the pulpit to speak about mental health. And there was a lot of interest. The idea of our clergy saying, it's okay, this is a conversation we need to have, and we want to help you, and it's okay to bring these things out in the open. So I started to hopefully get a few dozen, then started to think maybe get 100, 200. Well, by the time they did the Weekend of Faith in this city, 1,000 houses of worship participated in a single weekend. Think of the tens of thousands of people who were reached and what it did to start that process of transformation. We believe at the local level, each and every one of us can start that change. And then we believe we can link it together. And just like Mick and I wandered into Senator Inhofe's office, wouldn't it be wonderful to have so many of you, my fellow mayors, and so many of our fellow mayors and other leaders walking the halls of Congress, all regions, all different viewpoints, but unified on the fact that we have to change this culture. And we have to reach people in a way we never have before. And if we do that, there will be fewer people incarcerated. If we do that, there will be fewer people homeless. If we do that, there will be fewer people who get dislocated economically. There will be fewer families that fall apart if we get to the core of things. So I want to thank you again. I hope you'll be able to look back and say this was a moment, this conference, where people got a little more inspired, where people learned from each other and took those ideas back and supercharged their efforts a little bit. But I could tell you here in this city, we're already doing things we didn't know we could do, which is a perfect segue to my very pleasant responsibility here to introduce the leader of this effort. And I will simply do it this way. Big changes don't happen if you're timid. They don't happen if you convince yourself what's not possible. They only happen if you convince yourself what is possible. And Chirlane has had a habit. I've known her now for over 25 years, a quarter century. She has a built-in audacity, which I fell in love with to begin with. And I've marveled at it because she does not ever say what can't be done. When she decided to take on mental health, I assure you there were easier missions, ones that might be more immediately gratifying, but she felt a moral obligation to attack the stigma head on. And she knew as First Lady of New York City, she would have the bully pulpit and the opportunity to do that. And she was doing it because it was the right thing to do, and she was doing it to reach so many people in this city we love. But she also hoped that is something that if we could figure it out, it could spread and we could learn from each other and we could deepen this. And she told all of us repeatedly that we had to get it right. And I don't know about you, but when my spouse tells me I have to get something right, it certainly influences my thinking. But she said to everyone in the administration that we weren't only going to have a great idea, it had to work for our people. They had to reach their lives and touch their lives. And what she has built is going to take that culture change to the grassroots. It's going to reach people who've never been reached before. It's going to get people an opportunity to get the treatment they never even knew they could possibly reach, because she had the audacity to think there was a better way. Ladies and gentlemen, First Lady of New York City, Chirlane McCray.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Bill. Please show this man some more love. I want you to know that Bill is here today, not just because I asked him, as you can tell, that he really gets it. He's here because he understands how the lack of public conversation, how the lack of services really affects the lives of all the people that he serves. So thank you, Bill. And thank all of you for being here. I feel a little shaky this moment because this means so much to me personally, and it means there are so many people who are depending on us to get this right. And so I have no words for how much I appreciate your passion and your dedication and commitment to really talking about this in a meaningful way, in a productive way. And because it's just the beginning of what we need to do, and we really do need all of you to get this right. So we are tremendously lucky that Mayor de Blasio, who is the mayor of the biggest city in our nation, is making our cause one of his top priorities. I think it's extremely helpful, and I'm tremendously lucky to have such a supportive partner. I call him Thrive's NYC supporter #1. Now, I'm fired up. I'm really fired up, and it's not just because of the policies and programs that you've shared over the last 2 days. It's also because of the conversations I've seen you having among yourselves, between panels, over drinks or lunch, and the promises that you've made to stay in touch. It's because everyone in this room is such a doer. And when doers get together, there's no idle chatter. Your time is very valuable. So I know that the information that you're acquiring here will be put to very good use. And because I know that, because you're a doer, you don't always have enough time. You always got a lot on your plate. So we're going to make it easier for you to do what you need to do. In order to achieve our goal of creating a true mental health system, we know we need to make it as easy as possible for you to act on everything that you've learned. And that is why I am proud to officially announce the city's Thrive Coalition. The goal of the coalition is to provide you and your colleagues back home the support network that will be available to you whenever you need it. And I hope every city represented here today will sign on. After all, Rome wasn't built in a 2-day conference, and the city's Thrive movement won't be either. The coalition will pursue 4 key goals, which I will walk you through right now. Will everyone please look in your folder and pull out the coalition pledge? It looks like this. A sheet of paper with a city's Thrive logo on top that starts with Our Challenge. I'll give everyone a second to find it. Okay, let's do this. First, we're asking every coalition member to build our capacity for action. Together, we represent more than 60 cities, large and small, which is a great start, but we need more. We really need more. We can't have too many. That is why we're asking every coalition member, every founding coalition member, to recruit at least 5 more cities or counties in 2017. Get a gold star if you can do more than 5. If everyone joins and meets their goals, we'll have many more than 300 cities in 2018, or by 2018, and I think that would be a very impressive coalition. Second, we're asking your city to engage with the coalition to lead a shared national mental health agenda. Now, that's a fancy way of saying that we want this conference to be the start of a beautiful and productive friendship. So we are going to organize a broad array of opportunities for us to strengthen the coalition with phone calls, days of action, and congressional advocacy. Third, we will advocate for comprehensive mental health reform. Now, clearly, none of us are waiting on the federal government to address the mental health crisis in our communities. We're doing what cities have always done, delivering for our people through sheer grit and ingenuity. But the mental health crisis is too big for any one city to overcome on its own. So we need the federal government to join us. And as I mentioned yesterday, we have good reason to be hopeful. After all, the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act, also known as CARA, passed with bipartisan support. But this Congress only has a few weeks left to push through real and lasting reforms. That's why we have drafted a letter urging them to take action before it's too late. We need the Senate to pass the Helping Families and Mental Health Crisis Act, and then we need President Obama to sign it. For that to happen, we need both houses of Congress to provide robust funding for all of the mental health programs they have already approved. Hear that? They have already approved them. And we need Congress to keep their promise to the American people and include $920 million in the 2017 omnibus spending package to implement CARA, because the opioid crisis is a national problem and it requires a national solution. So if you're interested in adding your city to this letter, and I hope all of you are, please find Walt on your way out. Walt, where are you? Please, he's right over there, am I right? Walt, okay, good. Look for him and sign on to this letter. Looking beyond this year, there are so many unknowns, as our Mayor de Blasio mentioned. We don't yet know exactly what the next president and the next Congress are thinking when it comes to mental health, which makes this coalition, this group of people, all that more vital. Together, we can make sure our leaders in Washington understand the urgency of the mental health crisis. We will work with them to craft legislation that builds on the work that we've already done. Coalition members will meet with their members of Congress on mental health issues at least once a year. And remember, when you join the coalition, you aren't speaking just on behalf of your city, you're speaking on behalf of a movement. And that means your message is much more likely to be heard. The fourth and final coalition pledge is where the rubber meets the road, as we like to say here. We hope you will expand best practices in your city by pursuing at least one new local initiative each year. Now, we're going to be developing a toolkit that synthesizes everything that we've learned here in New York City to help you. And as I noted yesterday, everything that we've done does not necessarily cost money or require money. I hope you just heard about the Weekend of Faith, which was enormously successful, that we held back in May with 1,000 houses of faith participating. Well, you know, there was no budget line for that. It was just a lot of coordination with our communities. And I also talked about our screening pregnant women and new mothers for maternal depression, which also required no additional funding. It was just about changing the process and talking with physicians and including OBGYNs and pediatricians to just do the work a little differently. So we can do this. We also hope you will share your community stories so we can all benefit from your experience. When you're part of the coalition, you will never need to start from scratch because you'll always be within emailing distance of someone with relevant experience. And the coalition is not just about information sharing, it's also about inspiration sharing. I don't have to tell any of you in this room that this is not easy work. And I'm not just talking about the operational challenges. We still live in a society that prefers to talk about mental illness and substance misuse in whispers, if at all. And that has resulted in so much needless suffering, especially in communities that already have more than their fair share. This work has rewards that cannot be measured in votes or dollars or data alone, because when we create successful initiatives, we bring hope back into people's lives. People like Bernard, who shared his personal story, true story, in a video that we put together. We're going to show this video.
Not being able to control something and controls you, that's when I realized I was really addicted. I couldn't stop. I didn't know nothing about addiction. I thought I was cool. I thought it was a way of life. My whole line of thinking had to change. It's up to you to admit you need help. And when the help comes, grab it and things will change. Today, I definitely thrive.
What we're doing here is about creating lifelines that our neighbors can use to pull themselves back up or pull themselves together. So I thank you, all of you, for being here today, but we have a big decision to make. When you get home, or even before you get home, I want to know, are you going to take the lead on creating a city where all of your neighbors can thrive? Yes. All right. How many people are committed to being leaders and joining this coalition? Raise your hand. All right. Well, when you're ready to officially commit, that means in addition to raising your hands here, actually sign on the dotted lines. Just send an email to the address at the bottom of your sheet, or talk to Walt. You can find him later. He'll give you his contact information. We can't wait to hear from you. I know your time is precious, so I'm going to close by saying thank you, thank you, thank you from the very bottom of my heart. Thank you for blessing us with the most precious of resources, which is your time, yourself, your energy. And thank you for being so generous with your attention and your insights and your experiences. I've had so many conversations with you, and I can't tell you how moved I am by what you've brought to this conference. And thank you for helping us strengthen the mental health movement. There are so many people who are depending on us to get this right. City by city, in red states and blue, we can create a coalition of cities committed to a future where it's as easy to get help for anxiety as it is to get help for allergies. I believe this. I really believe this. A future where every American can thrive. So thank you all. Travel safe, and you're welcome back here anytime.